all over the place in that gospel about people that are cheating other people and then are praised for it. And at the end, we have a phrase that's very familiar to us: you can't serve God and mammon. And yet, some of the praises in the text are exactly the opposite of that. Why? I'm not going to spend my time in a class on exegesis for you. I'm just going to say this. If you had lived a life of 5 or 6 years and made some memorable statements in different directions about different matters, and only the statements were collected without the context, and they were all stuck together in one passage, it would sound like that. It's very hard, really, to get back to the original setting of each of these statements that probably came from a different time. But St. Luke is writing this down around 70 AD, and Jesus said these things in 30. That's 40 years later. That's why sometimes the Gospels don't rhyme the way we think they ought to, because they're constructed that way. Well, the point I want to make this morning is simply this, to connect to the major point of my homily. Lives are incoherent. Yours is, mine is. They don't make one statement, they make a dozen different statements at different times. People grow up, they're early, they make big mistakes, they reform. People are wonderful when they're early, they make big mistakes later. Life doesn't make any sense that way. It's not coherent, nor is history. Somebody once said that history is a tale told by an idiot. It doesn't make any sense. It's this way, then it's that way, then it's this way again, and this way, and then that way, and then settles down and then goes crazy again. I'm reading a number of books on history now, not just on actual events, but on the philosophy of history. So I'm dumping all that on you this morning and trying to be as brief as I can. As brief. First, I want to speak to the frustration we all feel living in an age like ours, where we know more about the past than any past group of people have ever known about their past. We live with a massive amount of information, more than we can digest, frankly, and many people just don't want to hear it. Even as we're celebrating the monarchy, and we have a lot to celebrate, even if we're not monarchists, as I said at the beginning. There are people in India and people in Kenya, people all over the world that are rebelling against the whole idea of colonialism formed by the monarchy. So in a sense, everything that happens in history now, thrown up in our faces, makes us sort of want to run away from it. We just don't want to be living in a time with so much information that makes us so mad all the time. That people want peace. And that's one of the reasons we come to church. We want peace. We want some kind of a stable axis for our life to live on. We don't want to be bouncing back and forth in the emotional world we're bouncing back and forth in America now. We don't want to be living with a constant sense of frustration and anger and the inability to solve it. We don't want to be living between two parties. We don't want to be living between two different worlds. We crave one world. We crave peace, as we often pray for it, huh? And there's the second reading from Timothy saying, pray for the emperor. Well, some early Christian who was martyred might say to Timothy, you pray for the emperor. I lost my head under the emperor. At different times, the church says different things. I said at the beginning of the Mass, the monarchy, Queen Elizabeth, 70 years, an interesting institution that has grown from an absolute monarchy to a parliamentarian democratic monarchy, where the Queen stays out of politics. She represents the nation. She represents what we have in common. England, Scotland, Wales, whatever. She represents a kind of history that people want to be proud of and that people frankly need. We don't have that. We have two parties that battle for power but have no necessary concern for the nation. In the church, you have political, theological parties battling back and forth. Luther against Cajetan, modern theologians who want this and other theologians want that. And I, as a priest, swear allegiance to the Pope. I swear allegiance to somebody that stands for something larger than the current rage in theological opinion. I stand for the unity of the church, for peace in communities like this, for love. It's hard to do that because opinions differ. And when opinions differ dramatically, love goes out the window. We fight. So I think when we bury Queen Elizabeth, when the world, in fact, buries her, I pray they don't bury that kind of institution or that kind of concern for the integrity of the memory of a nation and a church. That we basically pray for the unity in our own country as we come up on elections. That something transcends the current set of interests and advancement that politicians might have from one stripe or another. That transcends that and thinks of the people, of the nation. Last week I turned on the TV just to catch this wonderful program that they were playing about 9/11, and it was all focused on the firemen. I hadn't seen that before. It was quite touching, moving. Moving because men ran into that building who knew they wouldn't come out. Now, we see that in war all the time, just wars I speak of. But to see it on a very small scale, of faces that we knew, of men with families, who put on their fire helmet and ran into one of the Twin Towers knowing they wouldn't come out, and how their superiors felt about their sacrificing their life moved me deeply. Now, tune in to watch the funeral of the Queen with this homily in mind, that we try to basically remember something that transcends political arguments, that kind of, in a sense, makes us realize we're God's people. We're one. One could not imagine the Pope at the time of Henry VIII sending congratulations to the King for separating the Church of England from the Church of Rome. But our Pope has. That people have to be able to transcend certain arguments, even while not brushing them away, for the sake of something else in a different time. I buried a 90-year-old man last week. Not the king, not the queen, just one of us, who had lived a very wonderful life. When a lot of things became difficult, he dug deeper and made them better. We all need that kind of hope with our lives, that they serve some purpose, that your life and mine and the life of the church, the life of our nation is not a tale told by an idiot, that it has some direction to it. And we can lend our shoulder pushing in the right direction. I had dinner the other day with another 90-year-old person I visit, very famous in Baltimore. And we were talking, and he told me how discouraged he was, not by politics really, but by other things. And I felt bad for him, as smart as he was. I sort of think when you get to a certain age, like many of you are, like I am, you have to live a life not of regret, but of hope. That's the core of the Christian religion. Yes, the young make enormous mistakes, and they feel somehow like history is in their hand and they can turn everything around. but time will tell. And you have to live humbly to live well. You have to live with a certain kind of humility in your heart to live well, to humility about your own opinions, and turn the rest to God. I believe in one God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, of all things visible and invisible. I believe in one Lord, Jesus Christ, the only begotten Son of God, born of the Father before all